Welcome viewers to our next episode of Gender Diversity in an Altered World. This is a special episode for us because we have a special guest today on this show. And our focus is going to be about beating all odds. Today we have with us Nelia Cruickshank. She's the CEO of Olimax Medical Supplies. It's an innovative healthcare thought leader. She has close to 2 decades of experience in leadership roles across leading healthcare brands. Prior to Olimax, she was at Cardinal Health, where she led business retention and development activities for $500 million revenue portfolio as a director of marketing and strategy. Uh, prior to Cardinal, she worked with MedLabs, a startup, as a vice president of operations, strategic development, client relations, and marketing, where she grew the company portfolio to $200 million. She holds a master's of business administration and bachelor's of science in marketing from Northern University. She sits on various board appointments and advisory positions. Welcome, Nelia. It's a real pleasure to have you on our show today.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be
So,
here.
so you seem to have had an illustrious career, right? So some huge numbers that you've achieved as handling leadership position in different roles. So how has it been reaching this position of a CEO? Because you have very few women leaders who are CEOs. So what's been your journey like?
Well, I know, thank you for that. I want to say an encouraging question because it's a question that I would like to see many women being asked, especially women of color. And
Yes.
my journey started when I was younger. When I was a young girl, I had a father who was very entrepreneurial minded. I come from a family of educators. Both my mother and father were educators. My father was a school principal. My mother was a school teacher. But my father always had these side hustles where he would buy businesses and, induce whatever amount of energy you need to put in from a business point of view, strategy point of view, until we grows and then he'll resell them. So I have always had the opportunity to have a front row seat in learning, understanding business. Coincidentally, my father wanted me to be a doctor, but because of what I grew up learning and watching, that's what I gravitated to more naturally than wanting to be a physician. So part of my journey for being in healthcare was a balance of making sure that I'm in a space where I can help to give back, but at the same time use the type of skills that I've obtained throughout my life. So I moved to the US in 2008, and I started volunteering for the blood bank and Red Cross Society, drawing blood, because I wanted to learn more about healthcare. And when I was going to school, then I was given an opportunity. Someone gave me a chance to start working in corporate America when I worked for Mercy Health Partners for 8 years. And my boss at that time took chance in me. And that really was the beginning of my career in the healthcare space as a leader. And it's been nonstop ever since. And I'm grateful to everyone who has been a sponsor, coach, and all of the above along the way to help me to be very well positioned for anything that was to come along the way.
That's really nice to hear because I think having male champions is very important element as well to see more women representation in leadership roles. So I was going through a Fortune list of CEOs, and I think there are about 30 odd women CEOs in that list. And if you actually look at African American women, there are hardly any representation there. So what do you think is going on that front?
I want to be an optimistic speaker for you today, in our dialogue. And I want to look at this as we have to stay hopeful for the future. When you think, put the politics aside, I'm in the US right now, and I want to be able to talk intelligently about what is happening and how to best support everyone in our space. When you think about the Me Too movement that is going on in our country, when you think about the Black Lives Matter movement that is going on in our country, when you think about Kamala being nominated to be the VP of our country potentially in the future, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, when you think about a former president's wife giving a speech at the convention for the Democrats, speaking intelligently about what our country should have going forward, it gives me hope that this is a new world, where in a new world order, where women now have an opportunity. all these things that I mentioned, it is not about being a Black woman. It is about being given the opportunity to have a seat at the table with everyone else. So I see in my own space the history being gradually erased as we're forging for the future with our lives.
Yeah, so
As
I think
leaders.
this is definitely a new chapter that's opening up where we have more women of color. We can say hi to her also as part of the interview.
She's
That's
gone now. Sorry.
yeah, that's the new normal. So we are absolutely fine with that, to have those special guests making their appearances as well. So that was a very good note, right? So of being hopeful that there is a new chapter that's opening in our history. So if we look at it from the odds which are staked for women to move to CEO positions, and I believe for women of color it's even more higher from that perspective, right? So what are some insights which you've got on that front?
I would say to you, as a woman of color who has, quite frankly, most of my career, if not all of my career, I was only the only female and
Mm,
the African American slash Black female in a room, whether it was in a
mm,
boardroom, in a presentation, whether it's sitting across the table, whether it's just going to lunch to just take a
mm,
break and go have lunch. I have
mm,
gone through a lot of that in my professional career. And one thing that I've learned is we as the underrepresented bunch, right, have to learn to feel comfortable around everyone because we're always on the stage. If you think about
mm,
it, you could be standing there with 500 people while to them everyone is normal. For you, you stand out, by virtue of
yeah.
how you look,
Yeah.
and to not be used as a disadvantage. Rather, take that difference and spin it around and leverage it by having the right international, interpersonal, and political dynamics to forge the relationships that helps you to bridge and create the visibility that is needed for you to be successful. That is place number one. Number 2 point is position yourself as a leader and not just a Black woman. You know, I may have been born as an African American woman. However, my skills speak more to my leadership than who I
Yeah.
am as a person. The skills that I've acquired have allowed me to be positioned for success. As a result, everybody needs to appreciate and represent that equally. As a result, the world also needs to be very forgiving and appreciative of the fact that when we sit around the tables, it is our skill sets that has brought us there, not the color of our skin. As a result, yes, in some cases, you may have instances where people don't know how to mentor or coach or sponsor Black women. That's where the
True.
dialogues end up, so that those odds that are staked against us and the barriers that are put in front of us can be eliminated, so the playing field is really even out for everyone. Uh, I arrived here personally, I can tell you my own journey, going back to the question you asked me initially. I was
Mm,
not just a woman, I was a foreign woman. So you talk about a dynamic added on to another dynamic that
yeah.
forges more differences and separates you even further from the norm. So, how do you bridge the gap to make sure those don't become leading statements about your identity? Rather, you want to have the statements led about you being a leader.
Mm. True, true. That was so wonderfully portrayed. So it's about your skills which matter, and not how you look or what ethnicity that you belong to. That's so true. So there are a lot of obstacles which women encountered on route to becoming a senior leader. And a few of the elements that you mentioned are right, but there are also a lot of perceived obstacles which may actually not exist there. So yes, there are few obstacles which women encounter, but a lot of things is also playing out in our minds as a Black woman who's aspiring to becoming a leader. So how does one overcome those perceived obstacles?
Well, and that's a great question, right? First of all, I think you have to always wear the hat that no matter what position you have in an organization, whether you're working for for a Fortune 500 startup, mid-size, whatever size of a corporation there is. You have to wake up in the morning, put on your clothes and your shoes, and act like a leader every day, right?
Mm.
Uh, because unfortunately, if you don't position yourself for that, you find yourself with no one else in your corner. Because when people start getting weeded out in organization, you become one of the first targets because you were really never positioned for that success. So to overcome those obstacles as a women minority who wants to be a leader, we need to find a ways to continue to break down the barriers, including the discrimination barrier, the bias barrier of how we look, even the lack of mentorship and sponsorship that happens around and across the table or in the offices when we are standing in line with everyone else in the corporate
Yeah.
space. So
Mm-hmm.
experience is going to help us to feel and have the level of inclusion that is needed, especially when you're leveraging your networking opportunities effectively.
True, true, true. So
So,
from,
right.
yeah, please go ahead.
No, and I bring up the networking piece because I'll give you an example. I took a sabbatical away from the corporate space for a couple of years because I was having my kids. It's a decision I made out of my life goal that I needed to do that, get it, in motion, and then jump back into work. I just knew I could not do both. Now everybody's formulated different. Some
Yeah.
people can be best of all worlds. I just
Mm.
have a house where my husband is also a healthcare executive. So there's no way both of us could have been effectively gone away from the
Mm.
kids and take care of our children at the same time. So I took that
Mm.
step back. So even during that season, I continued to make sure that my network opportunities and those lines of communication were open, which is part of the
Mm.
reason why I ended up landing a CEO role at this juncture
Mm.
in my
Mm.
life.
Okay.
People know who you are. It's not always about who you know. It's also about
Mm.
who knows. And when you put those two together, they become more effective. Just like when we talk about mentorship and sponsorship, not just about I need a sponsor, I need a mentor, I need a coach. Who are you mentoring? Who are you
Yeah.
sponsoring? Who are
Mm.
word goes around. You learn more about leadership not just from who you aspire to be and look up to and learn from. You even learn more from those that look up to you, and they're able to emulate the things that you do, and it becomes a balanced approach to this leadership, not just for Black women, not just for women, for anyone in leadership.
True, true. So that was a wonderful statement where you said it's not just about who you know, but what do they know about you. In fact, there's research which we had carried out at Pink Ladder also recently, and it was very surprising to note that a lot of a high percentage of women actually believe that their work should speak for itself, and they did not need to actually build a personal brand or go out, step out and network and create those relationships so that you're being a lot more visible there. So what would be that
and, and,
advice that you would, yeah.
and that's part of our culture. Part of our culture teaches us work hard, you know, be the smarter one in the room, but that is not all that's going to get you there. Whatever your there is, whatever your one goal is or one thing is that you're training, moving towards, it has to be a holistic approach. You can't
Yes.
just use one swim lane to become a leader. Just like you can't just have one set of education to become a leader, it's everything else included that makes you be successful or positioned for success.
True, true. So, from a leadership standpoint, then what advice would you like to give to women who are aspiring to become, senior leaders or break that glass ceiling? And this could be advice that could be applicable to women across. And maybe if you have any specific advice for women of color to emulate, would love to hear that from you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. I would say the first thing, learn to be the servant leader.
Mm.
All leaders aren't servant leaders. Be a servant leader that people are excited to not just work for, but work alongside. which means that when people get up and they're excited to come to work, unfortunately right now with the COVID environment, we all get to work from home, which kind of takes away the camaraderie of the office environment and quite honestly, even some of the office politics. However, when you function and position yourself as a servant leader that people want to gravitate towards, find yourself positioned in a way that you are a leader that is a servant leader who people get excited to work with and alongside, which means you also have to be a approachable leader. I want to speak directly to my African American potential leaders out there who are women. I think by nature, sometimes we're so tense and we cannot be as approachable as we should. So we need to make sure that we are positioning, even our demeanor allows for our servant leadership to show through the way we position ourselves physically so that people are not to want to have a dialogue with us. I say this because one of my biggest career move came along as a result of a cooler talk that I had with someone who never knew a lot about me. And from the day they learned enough about me, it became their life mission to want to help me to get to the next step. But I had to open up. I had to learn to get out of my own comfort zone and say it is okay. We're here in a work environment and I need to be able to work with everyone and learn to be alongside them every day like everyone else. And that became true for me for my next career move at that time, of my season. So absolutely be a servant leader that people want to be excited to work with and work around and work alongside. Oftentimes people say that successful leaders have to have mentors, and I think I touched a little bit on this earlier, have mentors, have a sponsor, have a coach. I also want to challenge everyone out there, not just Black women who wants to be a leader. You need to consider having a counselor in your life, right?
Yeah.
When mentorship and sponsorship and coach, all these things sort of work collectively in our work environment. But when you think about, I'm not a man, so I can speak intelligently about how men think every day in their lives, just categorically, but I can speak to my life as a woman. We have so many things that are wrapped up in our minds, not just as a leader, as a person. Every day when we wake up, we have a laundry list of things that we have to do. When you have that counselor who works with you to give you the insights around the balance of your personal and professional life, then you feel like you are accomplishing and moving along with your life goals. It really positions you to be a successful leader on all fronts, not just in your work environment, but in your personal environment, whether you're a mom, a wife, or just a young professional that is up and coming, who is single, who has a partner, whatever the situation is, I encourage you to make sure that you have a counselor in addition to having a mentor, a sponsor, and a coach, because it all works together. There's some cohesiveness that comes with that. And once you have all that mapped out, make sure you also do the same thing and pay forward, as I alluded earlier, to also become someone's mentor, someone's sponsor, and someone's coach.
Absolutely. So in fact, that's very true, right? Because a lot of women think, or for that matter, even men. So I can speak on behalf of a lot of men also, that asking for help is seen as a sign of weakness. And rather than saying that it is going to help me progress to the next level, they look at it as a sign of weakness. So be it going to a counselor or going to a coach or any of those things. So the question is, they ask themselves, why do I need that? I think, I can handle it myself. Or how will they know what I am going through? Right. So that's very true. And having somebody in that position really helps individuals to take that step forward.
Right. And the idea is to have that person help you to think through everything that you have in front of you to make sure you're making the best decision in a well-rounded and holistic form. It doesn't necessarily make you less of a person or less qualified for the things that you're going for, you're resilient about, and you have grit over. It's a matter of what that person is, the value you wouldn't be able to give yourself at the end of the day. Anyhow, and I also want to say one last point, which I have found very intriguing, yet important and crucial in all leaders that I've been able to have the opportunity to work with as my mentors and sponsors and coaches, etc. is that have a habit of continuing to always acquire more knowledge and wisdom. And what I mean by that, a lot of the successful leaders that I've seen, especially the women leaders as well as men, so because it's not a gender thing when it comes to being a successful leader, it's about your qualifications and what you bring to the table as a leader. And is that we all need to have a habit where we are reading leadership books really frequently on a monthly basis. If you find yourself not acquiring more knowledge as a leader, learn from the best to become the best. I'm sure you're familiar with that saying, and aren't we all? Learning from the best does not just mean going to sit down with our mentor and sponsor and coach and counselor, as I've mentioned. Learn from the best by also being able to read from those that have written history on things that have happened successfully. I often go back to the book, The Outliers, that Malcolm Gladwell wrote about all successful people, right? A lot of their success is out of resilience, grit, repetition. So if you're going to be a leader in time, you got to put a lot of time into the very things that you want to get results out of. You want to be a great leader, then you have to put a lot of time into things that it takes for you to become a great leader. Learn your space. For me, for example, being a healthcare leader, I have invested so much time to learn a lot about healthcare, not just the medical space. I know a lot about the laboratory industry. I know a lot about the acute care healthcare industry. You have to become your own subject matter expert in your space for you to be able to be positioned well and succeed in the very things that you want to continue to lead people on. So reading, acquiring knowledge, become the person of wisdom in your space, just positions you for the success that no one can take away from you, regardless of what color, skin, and gender you are.
Absolutely, absolutely true. So now my last question would be, from the current pandemic situation standpoint, we've also seen that this is also given an opportunity for organizations to probably relook at the agenda of gender diversity under a new lens altogether. So if you were to give an advice to organizations out there as a senior women leader, what is one thing which probably you would ask them to do differently this time while they're approaching the charter of gender diversity?
Absolutely. I want to kind of start by telling you what I'm hearing, because I am constantly talking to people in our environment, not healthcare, but in other industries, right? Diversifying also gives us a well-rounded approach to how we should lead. I am learning more and more that there are a lot of organizations that are looking into making sure they have a diversity and inclusion leadership team within their environment or company or organization that is on board full-time to help to strategically position the organization to be a lot more welcoming to diverse leaders and employees, as well as being more inclusive with everyone else out there. I can tell you specifically, I being part of a company where we are minority owned and female owned, we find now having more dialogues with hospitals and organizations that we would have never had dialogues with, because there's a big movement around, we need to make sure that everyone is included at the evaluation table, so everybody has a fair and fighting chance to be able to get whatever contract or agreement or whatever that they're going after. So my advice to organizations out there, leaders and people who are in an influential position, is that take time to learn more about what the Black leaders, the Black women out there who aspire to be leaders, would like to see happen, because that can then position them to be a lot more successful at attracting the talent that fits the mold of having the executives that are minority women in their organizations. And most importantly, one of the things that I've learned in my world of leadership is that it is challenging for people to relate to us because they've never been in our shoes, right? But being able to open up the dialogue around, I know I will never be you, but I want to learn enough about you to see how I can best support you going forward. That in itself allows organizations to have a position where they are viewed as a welcoming organization to everyone on all walks of lives, not just Black women, LGBTQ, and everyone else in the environment who needs to be included in the decision making, as well as evaluation of whatever next position that they may have open for a person to be considered for. So bottom line, the level field has to be plain and for everyone else, including women of color, to be part of by feeling included. So organization have a diversity and inclusion representation in your space. You may not know what to do, but there are plenty of leaders out there who know how to get you there.
Yeah, yeah, that's such wonderful advice to a lot of organizations. I had a very insightful discussion. I'm glad we were able to schedule this, and I'm sure there's a lot of learnings for aspiring women who want to become leaders, as well as organizations, and how they should be approaching their gender diversity charter in this new normal. Thanks once again, Nelia, for your time, and it was real
Absolutely
pleasure.
great for having the platform to talk about the things that matter to our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.